Good morning. Happy Easter. Good morning. Great to see everyone here in the sanctuary. How's everybody feeling today? Yes. I'm just waiting for my good friend Ralph to bring me my notes for today. But what a week it has been. Am I the only one who's had a very interesting week today, or this past week? Well, as weeks usually start off, sometimes they start off a little rocky, but sometimes they start off really well. Let's say, on Sunday, somebody throws you a parade, a procession as you go into town. On Tuesday, you get to overthrow and overturn some tables when you feel that an injustice is happening. And on Thursday, you're having dinner with your besties, your good friends, the ones that really get you. But then things take a turn for, let's say, what seemingly would be the worst. And you're taking a stroll in a garden, and suddenly you find yourself knowing that something is imminent, something is going to happen, and it was placed on your heart. It is your calling to do. And this is the story of the Holy Week of Jesus. And this is why we're here today, because after everything, the good, the bad, the indifferent, He is risen. Can we say He is risen? He is risen. And we're not just talking about this bodily form of Jesus. We are talking about the Christ, the Christos, the anointing, the connection to the one God that lives and abides in each one of us. That presence can be felt whenever we take a moment to just be still in the mind. And this story, this resurrection story, the Holy Week story, is a good one to remember because we can apply it to everyday living. And that's what we do here at Unity. We are all about practical Christianity. That is putting Christianity, putting the teachings of Jesus into practice every moment of our lives. And that was His call. And so we see Jesus after a glorious week. He takes His disciples, 11 of them, because remember, one had to leave early. As sometimes when we go out, there's always that one friend that leaves early and got other business to do. And so, we're going to see Judas a little bit later. But so He has 11 of His disciples, and He takes 2 of them further into the garden. He asks them to just watch out, to stay awake, and just to keep watch. And then Jesus goes by Himself deeper into the garden. And He knows that what He was brought here to do is about to unfold. And during this time in the garden, He says many prayers. And Jesus has been tempted before, has been tempted in the wilderness. He's been tempted to basically just go against His mission, the mission that was placed on His heart, and to just go with the worldly ways. And again, in this garden, He finds Himself asking God to take this cup, if God will, from Him. But then He realizes that this must be done. And He says, "Thy will be done, God." And He goes out and He sees that His friends, Peter and John, are sleeping. And so if we look at this metaphysically, we see that when we have temptations, let's say, to go against what the call on our heart is, it could be that we have to do something for our job and we're just kind of dreading it, but we know it must be done. It's ours to do. Or maybe a family emergency or crisis. And we have our watchdogs, or the thoughts and that consciousness that's within us that's supposed to keep watch and guard us and making sure that we stay on the path. Sometimes it goes to sleep. Sometimes you can find it napping, and then suddenly all types of things, all types of other motives start to come on in. And so Jesus finds His disciples, 2 of them, sleeping when He told them to stay awake. And He wakes them up, and he's quite funny, actually, if you read the book, or if you read where He's actually talking to His disciples. And it's not the book, it's the Bible. So that book. So when you read the Bible, you can see that Jesus actually had a really good sense of humor. But at this time, He was really calling His disciples to stand guard. He needed their support. he was under so much distress because he knew what he had to do. He knew what was going to be taking place to fulfill the prophecy, that he started to sweat blood. I don't know anyone out there that under extreme stress has sweat blood, but it is documented that that's exactly what Jesus did. And so we see him just in this turmoil. And then again, so after he leaves his disciples, he goes back to the garden, and he then again asks, basically, is this mine to do, God? And then he ends that prayer with, thy will be done. How many of us can face the dilemma and just hand it over to God to do in our day-to-day lives? It may seem difficult to do, but when we call on God for the highest of everyone involved, because God is not so individualistic. So God sees the whole picture. God is the whole picture and does the best for everyone involved in a situation. And so after this prayer of intercession that Jesus does, he prays for himself, he prays for his disciples, and then he later on prays for other believers that would be coming in the future. He then realizes that, and he connects with that one consciousness. And in this garden, the rest of his doubt, the rest of his fear is pressed out of him. And that's what Gethsemane means. It's the pressing of oil. And when you press oil, when you expel it, you take every drop out. And so all of the outworn, the fear consciousness, everything is what was pressed out of him in that garden. And we know what happens then. During this time, we have Judas talking to the powers that be, and then we have the guardsmen going to the garden, because that's where Judas knew that where Jesus would be. And suddenly, we see that not all is well with his friends. We see that there was an ulterior motive for Judas leaving early. He left in shame, and suddenly, when he kisses Jesus, Jesus knows that he is about to be deceived. So in this garden of consciousness, like Jesus, we get to choose whom we will serve. Are we going to serve the outer things of this world? Are we going to serve a different master than God? Are we going to go with the worldly things? In the garden, our prayer, if we choose the higher calling then, is, God, thy will be done. When I cannot trace you, let me trust you.
When I have more questions than answers, when the dawn seems distant in the darkness, Jesus, let your spirit speak softly. Oh, to feel the trust you found in that garden where you knelt. Let me live the prayer of Gethsemane. Let my life reflect the words formed there upon your tongue. Let me live the prayer of Gethsemane. Not my way, but thine be done. Jesus, give me strength just to listen when the ways of my will drown your whisper. Keep your voice of wisdom so near me. Oh, to feel the love you felt in that garden where you knelt. Let me live the prayer of Gethsemane. Let my life reflect the words formed there upon your tongue. Let me live the prayer of Gethsemane. Not thy will, but thine be done. Teach me to reach beyond my God. Shape me to be everything you are. Let me live the prayer of Gethsemane. Let my life reflect the words formed there upon your tongue. Let me live the prayer of Gethsemane. Not my way,
Not my way,
not my will,
not my will,
not my way,
not my way.
but thine be
And now we return to the garden where Jesus is whisked away by the guards, but not before Jesus performs yet another miracle in his ministry, the healing of the ear that Peter chopped off with his sword. And suddenly, Jesus finds himself in the judgment of Pontius Pilate. Now, Pontius Pilate was kind of a ruler of Judea at the time, and he was the representative of the Roman government. The power of life and death was actually in his hands. And when Pilate spoke in that area of life and death, it was usually Caesar who spoke through him. And Pontius Pilate was known to be quite harsh to Jews during that time. He didn't like them, but he did something unusual. He actually took Jesus aside and asked him a couple of questions. He wanted to get a better idea of what it was that Jesus had or was being tried for, just getting his side of the story, which was unusual for him to do. And we see then that there's something that gives within him. There's something that says, you know what, this is not mine to decide. And so he hands him over to another ruler, Herod. But Herod could find no fault with Jesus as well. And so he gives them back to Pilate, who then starts to question the crowd, because the crowd, all those people, remember in Palm Sunday, all the people that were screaming, Hosanna in the highest, blessed be the name of our Lord. Suddenly, they wanted Jesus persecuted. They wanted him crucified. They even were willing to trade somebody who was jailed already, who had committed a murder in the temple days previous. They wanted to do an exchange for Jesus, who had murdered no one. And we see that Pilate actually starts to listen to those outer voices. So before, when he made a better decision where he was going to spare Jesus' life or have that decision be given to somebody else because he didn't feel it was his to make, suddenly now it is brought back into his arena. And unfortunately, this is where things go wrong. Now, there's a Pontius Pilate within each one of us, a part of us that wants to be rid of a problem and pass it off to someone else, only to have it return, and then ultimately it falling on our shoulders to make a decision. Luckily, the decisions most of us have to make day to day are not about life and death. We do not have to decide about the living or the dying of somebody. But in this story, that's exactly what he had to decide. And when we start to listen, and I can imagine the extreme difficulty it was, or it would have been during that time, to have all of these people screaming that they wanted a person to be crucified and not giving into it. But this is what the call is to do, to not listen to the outer voices, even the thoughts, the negative thoughts in our head, because they will lead us astray. They will lead us to something that may not be ours to do. But then again, this is prophecy that had to be fulfilled. And so Pilate fulfilled it. In any situation, regardless of the seeming severity or the lightness of it, we are asked to use wisdom and discernment to judge properly, to see with the spiritual eye and to hear with the spiritual ear. If we fail to use this inner guidance that God has given us, then we will find ourselves handing over our good to a lesser consciousness. And looking at our judgments, we then ask ourselves, will this decision bring more love, or does it propagate more fear and hate into this world?
We're not here to judge. We are here to love. There's no room for hate. We are just one human race. We must rise above. We are here to love. There's no time to waste anymore. We're not here to judge. We are here to love. There's no room for hate. We are just one human race. We must rise above. We are here to love. There's no time to waste anymore.
And what was needed at that moment, when Pilate made that decision, was more love. As A Course in Miracles says, anything that is not love is a call or a cry for love. Hate begets hate. Fear begets fear. And it produces in kind. And Jesus, our brother in the Christ, the way shower, the peacemaker, is sentenced to immediate death. In putting together this talk, actually, it was time in prayer and in meditation where I imagined what Jesus must have went through during this, from the moment he was condemned to death to his walk up to Calvary. And there was one of those things that my mind just could not wrap itself around. It seemed too big for me to comprehend. And the emotions that came through during that time, just the same. It was a bit too much. And I could just imagine that during this time with all the people involved, that it was overwhelming. And so we see that Jesus is walking up to Calvary, the place where his body would suffer a human death, carrying on his back a wooden cross. And these wooden crosses were not light wooden crosses. They were solid, 300 pounds estimated. Can you imagine 300 pounds after being beaten, walking to a place where you know you would finally be laid to rest? And there he finds beside him two thieves once he gets to Calvary. And one thief basically antagonizes him while he is on the cross. And the other gives a call and a cry for help, asking Jesus to save a space for him. In life, at times it may feel that we're being persecuted. that we're losing something, that the cross that we're carrying, the burden that we're carrying is too heavy. But God will always place on our path mighty companions. If we will just ignore the naysayers, there is something, a blessing, a person, a thing, spirit within that will provide comfort and that will help us to bless others. And so Jesus was actually still doing and continuing his ministry while he was there on the cross by comforting one of the thieves, saying that he would save a space for him. And after a time, his friends gathered, his mother gathered, his disciples, and Jesus had 7 last sayings. And they were documented in all 4 of the Gospels. But I believe one of the most trusting statement that Jesus made was, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit." When you can have that much trust, no matter what is happening, to just allow God's will to be done, that there was a promise given to each one of us. And ultimately, the lesson we are to learn is that we are to take up our own crosses of difficulties. You can cancel them out. And that is what the cross is, the canceling out of sin, of error, of bad health, bad finances, whatever that cross looks like for you. We cross it out because we're desiring a new experience, a renewed life. Death is a part of life, and every day we die to the former self in order for the new to be risen within us.
Not a word was heard at the tomb that day, just shuffling soldiers' feet as they guarded the grave. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days had passed. Could it be that Jesus breathed his last? Could it be that the Father had forsaken him, turned his back on his Son, deserting him? All hell seemed to whisper, just forsake him, he's dead. Then the Father looked down at his Son and said, "Arise, my love, arise, my love. The grave no longer has a hold on you. No more death's sting, no more suffering. Arise, arise, my love." The earth trembled, the earth trembled, and the tomb began to shake. And like lightning from heaven, the stone rolled away. And as dead man the guards stood there in fright, as the power of love displayed its might, and suddenly a melody filled the air. Riding wings of wind, it was everywhere. been longing to hear a sweet sound of victory, so loud and clear. Arise, my love, arise, my love. The grave no longer has a hold on you. No more death sting, no more suffering. Arise, arise. Fear, where are your shackles? Death, where is your sting? Hell has been defeated. The grave could not hold our King. Arise, my love, arise, my love. The grave no longer has a hold on you. No more death sting, no more suffering. Arise, arise, arise.
Arise. Christianity is founded on an empty tomb. And so we wait. That 1 day, that 2 day, that 3 day that had passed. And just as he declared in the temple the week previous, he is risen. What did this demonstrate? What did this show the world with this empty tomb? For 40 days after, there were spottings of Jesus all around. There was this cosmic energy, this spiritual body. No longer was he subject to things of the flesh. God's guarantee had come to fulfillment, to fruition. Jesus demonstrated that God is always good and that life is eternal. When he rose from the grave, when he showed the world that death was not real, that yes, the body will be laid down, but the spirit will always rise up. And that is our great lesson from Jesus, that when we can center into that, and this is a day-to-day, moment-by-moment decision. Love is a decision. Forgiveness is a decision. But so is hate. So is greed. And Jesus came here to demonstrate the law of forgiveness, the law of love, the law of compassion. All of these laws that God has placed within us. And anytime we go against a law of love or any of the other great laws that keep us in harmony with one another, then we start to see things go awry. But even then, the lesson is you have grace, that no matter what was done before, every day you can be born new. And when one rises, we're all rising. And because Jesus did, we will. And that was his promise as well, that what I can do, these things, these miracles, everything that I do, you will be doing, and even more. We don't want Jesus' ministry to just fizzle out because of nowadays problems. He showed us through his teachings just how powerful God is, just how powerful each and every one of you are. That you have this dynamic, creative, cosmic energy that animates you. And when the body ceases to be, you are still that and more. With that resurrection, with that canceling out, with the crucifixion of error, of sin, of death, Jesus demonstrated that there is life and life everlasting. So death, where is your sting? We are now free. Jesus demonstrated that with the resurrection. And it proves how this world of illusions does not shadow God's guarantee that is within each one of us. The Christ, our hope, the Christ, our glory. And who the Christ sets free is free indeed.
I couldn't see the sunlight in the shadows. I couldn't seem to find a soul to care. And in my darkest hour, you filled me with a power. And when I looked, the light was everywhere. The light of a million mornings filled my heart. The sound of a million angels sang my song. The warmth of a love so tender touched my life, and suddenly the light of a million mornings dawned in me. I never thought to understand the sunrise. I only knew it took away the dark. And in time, this healing and all the joy I'm feeling, I only know it comes into my heart. The light of a million mornings fills my heart. The sound of a million angels sang my song. The warmth of a love so tender touched my life, and suddenly the light of a million mornings dawned in me. And now that your glory has come shining through, let my life be a candle, Lord, that shines for you. Shines for you. Shines for you.
All right. That was a beautiful song. Yes. And so, as we conclude this adventure, this wonderful play in consciousness with the garden, the gavel, the grave, and the guarantee, we are left with a promise from Jesus that no matter what this world brings, that this Christ is within us, that life is everlasting. And I invite you to close the outer eyes as we take this time to reflect on this consciousness that rises, that knows of only God, that when we continue our sight, no matter what the outer appearance is, no matter what the diagnosis is, no matter what is happening, no matter how many times we have to pick up our own cross, that God goes before us, making the way straight. And in John 14:27, Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." That presence is always with us. Allow to just breathe in deeply to the essence of who and what you are in God and what God is in you. To realize what our brother Jesus, Yeshua, realized. That we are always one with the Father, Mother, universal element of love, of light. Let us take this into the silence.